This conference will now be recorded.
Electoral boundaries letter on behalf of council to be issued. And also, I believe, Huey, you have addition?
Yeah, that's on the straight, please, that's on the straight.
Okay. Any other additions this evening? Okay, and just, I believe, John, you're already aware, we're just a slight rejiggering of the presentations for the zoning. I guess if there's...
Excuse me, can you speak up, please?
Yeah, if there's no other additions, just the two additions, Festival of the Strait and federal boundary changes, then I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, the agenda is approved with the two additions. Okay, so the first item that we'll be discussing is the Pride Plan that's been circulated to council. Two specific events that we're looking for approval. One is the flag raising for the 1st of June. The second is the Pride Parade on June 26th, followed by a family picnic and a Pride show at the Granville Green. So I'd ask council if they would like to approve the Pride Plan, if they would consider making a motion.
Motion moved.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion that's on the floor?
Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, the motion is approved. I would also like to ask, I know council has certainly understands and recognizes all of the great volunteer work that Taylor Linloff has provided our council in terms of helping and facilitating Pride Month. She has done so since 2018, and I would ask council to consider making an official motion to designate her as our Town of Port Hawkesbury Pride facilitator, to make it official.
So second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? And I would also ask if council's okay with it, maybe we can send her just a letter of thank you on behalf of council with that regard.
Yep.
I just need a motion then for the letter.
Motion moved. Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, the motion is approved. We're moving on to Nova Scotia Access Awareness Week. So the information was in your agenda package for this. Just to note here for our gallery, what is Access Awareness Week? It's an annual celebration and opportunity the last week of May to raise awareness and engage Nova Scotians on issues around access and inclusion, recognized across the country as National Accessibility Week. This year, Nova Scotia's Access Awareness Week is May 29th to June 4th. And just a fun fact, Nova Scotia was the first province in Canada to champion Access Awareness Week as an extension of Rick Hansen's 1987 Man in Motion World Tour. So everyone has a copy of the proclamation. And what is the wishes of council with regard to the proclamation?
I move that we adopt the proclamation. Second.
Okay, would council like me to read the proclamation?
Sure.
Okay, sure. Whereas the week of May 29th, June 4th, 2022 is recognized as Access Awareness Week, and Access Awareness Week aims to celebrate achievements made both by and for persons with disabilities in the areas of accessibility, transportation, housing, employment, recreation, education, and communication. And this is the 35th year that this public awareness initiative has taken place in Nova Scotia, and Access Awareness Week promotes the inclusion of all Nova Scotians with disabilities as full citizens within our communities, and through public awareness, community partnerships, and education, This campaign aims to foster an environment of equal participation for persons with disabilities within Port Hawkesbury. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Susan Beaton, on behalf of Port Hawkesbury Town Council, do hereby proclaim May 29th to June 4th, 2022 as Access Awareness Week in the town of Port Hawkesbury, dated for today in the town of Port Hawkesbury. So what is the wishes of council?
Got the report.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, the proclamation is adopted by council. Thank you. Don't think there was anything else on that item, Terry?
No, I don't think so.
It was just proclamation?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to review of recommendations from our Planning Advisory Committee. So we have our Director, John Bain, with us here today to provide three different presentations. I would ask that after each presentation, then council can determine whether or not they want to accept the recommendation that has come forward. So we're going to start with the amendment to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to amend the Granville Street waterfront development C2 zone. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Your Worship.
You'll have to speak up a little bit though, since we don't have microphones.
Do you want, like, stand?
Yeah, it might be better to stand, and you can move your slides.
So the first application that we have tonight is for Granville Street. It's for the commercial zone in the Granville Street area. And it's a fairly simple amendment related to distilleries, permitting distilleries along the waterfront. It is actually exactly the same amendment that we just did for Richmond County 2 nights ago. Council approved it for the Arishet area. And so you switched my slides already, is that?
Yeah, we did.
So there was an application at the beginning of the year from Mr. Cole to amend the waterfront zone to allow these craft beverage facilities. And right now, they're not permitted. So it's a pretty straightforward amendment that would add them to the municipal planning strategy that establishes the C2 zone and then defines them in the land use bylaw. The specific property is where I get my haircut. So they're going to put a portable distillery on that property. At least that's the intent. Right now, they're permitted in the industrial parks, in the mixed use zone, in the business park, but there is no definition for them. And so that won't change. The breweries and distilleries that are permitted in the business park will remain, but the amendments will allow them to happen on the C2 zone. And again, that's primarily along Granville Street. Municipal planning strategy amendment. So there's a policy that establishes the zone. And we're simply adding craft beverage facilities to the policy that establishes that zone. And then along with that, we're adding the definition. So there's a definition of a commercial brewery, a commercial distillery, and a craft beverage facility. So the first two definitions will define what's already permitted in the mixed use zone and in the business park. And the other definition will define what will be permitted in the waterfront zone. We recommended that. So all of these staff reports are available on our webpage. When these go to a planning advisory committee, they become public documents. They are put up on our webpage. You can see them at www.edpc.ca. If you want to see this staff report, that's where it is. As soon as these documents go to planning advisory committee, they become public documents. They're on the webpage. So you can you're having trouble getting to sleep some night and you want to read one of my staff reports, they're there for you. But in this case, it does give you the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission's definitions and the definitions that we'd be adopting in the document. So for a micro brewery, it would be defined as a craft brewery where the primary business function is the production and packaging of less than 15,000 hectoliters of beer per year. A micro distillery, less than 75,000 liters per year. And a nano brewery, less than 2,000 hectoliters of beer, ale, cider, and other related beverages. So that was recommended to Planning Advisory Committee. And so then when it goes to Planning Advisory Committee is public. You're welcome to sit in on those meetings. And after it goes to Planning Advisory Committee, the recommendation comes to council, and council gives it first reading. Then we advertise public hearings, and then we hold a public hearing. And so this is pre all of that. We had a Planning Advisory Committee. It went to council for first reading. Council, rather than giving it first reading, said, well, we're going to send this to a special meeting of council to discuss the issues related to all of these amendments. So I just want to be clear of the transparency of the process. It is designed to be a public process.
Just a question, John, through you, your worship, on first reading. Do we need 2 weeks notice for the first reading? Or is that just from the first reading to the second reading?
No, so first reading is just at a regular session of council. It doesn't require a notification any more than what your regular council meeting would have the notification for. First reading is simply setting a public hearing date. It's not an approval. It just sets the public hearing date. And then I have to advertise 14 days before the public hearing, 2 consecutive weeks in a newspaper circulating in the area. And since we're dealing with weeklies, that's typically going to be 21 days. And most of the time, the next section of council. So it gives it first reading, I get the ad in the newspaper, get the second ad in the newspaper. Staff reports are already on our webpage. And then we have the public hearing. So again, what's unique about this situation is the council didn't give it first reading and you sent it to the, so for more input, but it is a public process. So if there are any questions about the microbreweries, the craft brewery amendment, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, any questions for John at this time?
I have none.
Okay, so I guess as the, Terry, did you have a?
No, so council has a decision. You can have first reading now, and we can have the public consultation on this amendment. We do it many times on a small amendment to the bylaw and the planning strategy prior to our committee of whole, which gives us that amount of time. That'd be June 21st, or we can put it off with a first reading at our June meeting, June public meeting, and then set a specific date for a public hearing to hear this change and other changes. So you can do that this evening, or you can wait until the public meeting is June.
Go ahead, Councilman McGuire.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Bain. From my understanding, for this microbrewery, he plans to have it on the property on the corner of Granville and McSween.
Yeah, that's correct.
And it's not in the main building itself.
That's correct.
And it would be in a sea container or shipping container. Is that what I understand?
So it's the design of the container is something that we were discussing with him. So it's not my understanding is it's not a sea can, but it's something that they were going to construct specifically for this, but similar to.
So it would be built on site.
No, he's having it built and moved to the site from what I understand.
Okay. And with the setbacks, so that would mean it wouldn't be on the McSween Street side, on the side of the house, or on the Granville Street
Yeah,
side of the house?
so that is the issue, right? It's because the amendment allows the craft breweries,
Yes.
and he wants to put it in an accessory building. And the bylaw right now for accessory buildings says that they need to be in the same architectural style as the main building on the property. So that's one of the issues for this specific amendment.
With the same.
But it is for, yeah, it has to meet the accessory building setbacks, that's right. But it could be in the house, like the amendment is for the whole of the street. So it could be in the house, it could be in an accessory building. If it's in an accessory building, the accessory building has to be consistent with the architectural style of the main building.
Thank you.
Any other questions for John? You?
No, I'm willing to make a motion.
I'll move the motion to accept recommendation from the planning advisor.
Go ahead, John.
So I guess I'm not, usually what you would be doing at this stage is just giving it first reading. You wouldn't necessarily, because it's not an approval, you just want to move the application on to the public hearing stage. And that's when council makes a decision. So,
Okay.
You know, this is an extra meeting than usual, but my recommendation would be, your motion would just be to give it first reading tonight.
Your worship, I move that town council give first reading and schedule a public hearing to approve the amendments to the Port Hawkesbury Municipal Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw to add a craft beverage facility as a permitted use in the Granville Street / waterfront development C2 zone, and then insert any common definitions.
So we're going to go ahead with first reading tonight then.
Are you second?
I would second it.
Seconding? Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? To get
Question.
this-
Question.
It has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, so we will set a date for the hearing then. Okay, so your next presentation, John, is with regard to amendments to the Port Hawkesbury Municipal Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw to permit accessory dwelling units.
The accessory dwelling unit.
Correct.
So one of the things that we've been looking at lately is issues with respect to the availability of housing in the town. This is a common concern throughout Inverness County, Port Hawkesbury, County, all areas that district planning serves. I have some personal experience with this because I've just lost a planner who's moved to HRM because she could not find housing in this area. So it's an acute problem. And when we're looking at our planning documents these days, we're trying to look at these documents through a lens of what we refer to as an IDEA, IDEA. We want them to be inclusive. We want them to be diverse. We want them to be equitable, and we want them to be accessible. And that lens is something that is very important. It's one of the reasons why I got into planning in the first place. To make the communities we live in to be inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible. And so one of the issues, if people can't find housing, they leave. So the feeling of the area advisory community, the planning advisory community, is how are we going to approach this housing problem? What we have done in other areas, and HRM has recently done it, HRM actually got all of the credit in the newspapers, but we did it in Antigonish first. And that was the last, actually, we did it in St. Peter's first. And so right now, accessory dwelling units in the town are only permitted inside the house. You can have an accessory dwelling unit, basement apartment, in your home, if your home is in the R2 zone. That's the only place where you can have it. And so the amendment is looking at the possibility of expanding so that somebody could still have 2 units, but one of those units could either be in a garage suite, or, which is, you know, basically a loft over a garage, or in a garden suite, a small building in the back of the house. We've done this in St. Peter's. It's been in St. Peter's for a number of years now. It's been in Antigonish as well, town of Antigonish. And so far, there hasn't been a huge uptake in it, but it is an available option for housing. Again, the staff report related to this document is on our webpage. And there are concerns with the document. I think this is the same document, or very similar, that we went to Inverness with, the community of Inverness, to allow for the same thing, these garden suites, garage suites for the basement apartment. The basement apartment is permitted already, but the garden and garage suites are not. So there are some restrictions on them with respect to the size of them, the location of them, the number of bedrooms in them. That's probably one of the major ones. They're only permitted to have two bedrooms in them. And they are really intended to be a secondary unit, either in the house, above your garage, or in the garden. The staff report makes the amendments that would allow that to happen, and then puts restrictions on them. I don't know if there's any more questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Through you, your worship, to John. If accessory buildings are permitted or basement apartments, when they're being constructed and they get permits, does there need to be another parking space put into that residence?
So the amendment. So the amendment doesn't address that, but the parking spaces would be part of the requirements regardless. So I would suspect you're adding a unit, you're adding the parking space.
And that would be 1.5 parking spaces, is it?
You know my bylaw better than I do, don't
That's in the bylaw.
He's on it.
So the general provisions for all residential zones, the parking of special vehicles, that's not permitted. So yeah, you're correct. All other dwellings, 1.5 parking spaces for each dwelling unit.
Thank you.
1.5 for the first, and then you add the second one, so you're gonna need 3 spaces on the property.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm impressed you know my bylaw better than.
Yes, yours. To you, your worship. John, do you have the slide for this, for your first, for your background there, and your recommendation, or your background on the first page?
No, I don't have any, I didn't have a slide for this one so much. I had.
Anyway, okay, I guess I'll just read the question. I guess, if you read the first sentence on your background down there, I'm a little concerned about any future zoning requirements even needed, R1 or R2, because it says, at the direction of the Planning Advisory Committee, planning staff are directed to initiate a process to examine possible increases in density of residential zones within Port Hawkesbury, including both R1 and R2. So if we agree this, then R1 and R2 is secondary suites, garden suites, and tiny home development. So there's no need, there's even a zone change from R1 to R2 wouldn't make it any matter, because in R1 you'd be able to do it anyway,
Yeah,
according to this language.
yeah. Well, that's the introductory paragraph, but the actual amendment is to the R2 zone.
That's on another amendment.
Yeah, no, so the amending page is the appendix B, is just adding the accessory dwelling units to the R2 permitted uses. So this would not.
I would move to strike that R1 out of there altogether. I don't think you need that, because that's just confusing everything.
Yeah,
You understand what I'm
yeah,
saying?
I understand what you're saying. The amendments are just to the R2 zone. So this amendment is just to the R2 zone, and then the other amendment is to change some of the R1 areas to the R2 zone. But related to that, and some of the issues that were raised in Inverness were concerns about architectural design of these other units. So what happened in Inverness is this document was sent back to staff to take a look at the form that those buildings might take, because we're only, as far as form goes, we're just saying that well, there's some size requirements, must match the main dwelling and building material types, cladding colors, and roof types. So there's a little bit, but there's not a lot there.
I just think that the R1, we don't need it in that, in this situation. It's making things confusing, because it says including both R1 and R2 zone. It says including both. So I think we want to differentiate between R1 and R2. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with the counselor. Maybe the first sentence was somewhat problematic, but the recommendation, the paragraph before, is for the R2 zone. And the amendments at the back of it are for the R2 zone. The
Okay.
general idea of increasing density in the R1 and R2 zone is something that we were looking at. But this amendment only applies to the R2.
Any other clarifying questions?
I'm sorry, we can't hear you, so would you mind speaking up a little bit, because it's hard. The acoustics is not good here.
You can't hear me?
Well, I think I'm loud enough. Who can't hear me? You can't?
No.
I'll turn the volume up.
Well, normally we have speakers here, but we're a little difficulty, but so bear with us. This is the first public meeting we had. Oh,
So the issue that was just discussed was that the staff report makes a reference in one of the paragraphs right at the beginning to the R1 zone. And the amendment, though, that are attached to the back and to in the recommendation in the first paragraph, again, these staff reports are available on my webpage, are just to the R2 zone. So the amendments for the R2 zone, which is the majority of the residential areas in town, are that you would be allowed an accessory dwelling unit, either in the house, over the garage, or in the backyard. And the architectural style of it, there's some minimal controls on that.
Okay. Any other questions for John? on
Yes,
this?
Your Worship. Go ahead, Councilman Dyer.
Yes, Your Worship, through you, to John. In this change as a maximum number of bedrooms of 2,
That's correct.
but it can have 1. And
It can't have one?
it can have one.
Yeah, it could have.
The maximum accessory dwelling unit floor area can't exceed 80 square meters of the main building,
80% of the main.
80%.
Yeah.
861 square feet. It doesn't say a minimum, what it can be. And you can put a bedroom and a washroom and a kitchenette in a pretty small building today. So I have concerns, maybe there might be 1 or 2 or 3 of these on a lot. I have printed off what tiny homes are, and this is from Nova Tiny Homes, Nova Scotia. What is a tiny house? When most folks use the term tiny house, they're referring to a home built using conventional methods, but on the scale of an RV travel trailer. These homes are often built on flatbed trailers and are owner built. Their square footage is usually does not surpass 300 square feet. So I have concerns with these accessory dwelling units of maybe having, like I say, 3 or 4 on a lot. Garage over the garage unit. I thought that for years we had restrictions on heights for garages. And I think not that long ago, we had to approve a minor variance. And so I just wonder how this is all going to affect that. Parking is an issue. We have some absentee landlords right now that are renting bedrooms with 5 vehicles maybe stuck over the lawn and in the driveways. We're having issues with unsightly properties, taking a long time to, I guess, get them cleaned up. And with absentee landlords, there doesn't seem to be much care in the properties, and you do have neighbors next to them. So I would like more clarification, or maybe for planning to put more into this, to what the restrictions would be, how small it would be, how many would be on the property. Are we going to lift the restrictions on the height of garages? Which I don't know. I don't know the rules, but on the fire marshal's office, but I don't know if you can actually have a house above a garage if you have motor vehicles in it or gasoline or anything. So it would be my recommendation to go back and maybe do a little more work on this one.
You know, I take your point, Counselor. I think this amendment in particular, and again, with my experience in Inverness, experience in Hood, that there is probably more work that can go into those amendments to make sure that we are getting what we need to get. But on your first point, the amendment would not allow somebody to do 3 in the backyard. You're allowed 2 units, and those 2 units are either, so if you had a basement apartment already, you couldn't get the garage suite or the garden suite. So you can't get 3. Now in Antigonish, you can get 4. They got rid of the R1 zone altogether. The RN1 zone, actually to 4, and very progressive. You know, so. 2 by right, 3 or 4 by site plan.
Councilor McCrory?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to John. So Councilor McIver, oh, sorry, apologize. Yep, sorry, no problem. So Councilor McIver already raised the issues that I was going to ask of you, and that was with the accessory units, it's a limit of 1 within a residence. You're confirming
That's
the
correct.
case?
So if you have the one if you have in the R2 zone, if you have a basement apartment already, a legal basement apartment, I wish they all should be legal basement apartments. you couldn't get the garage suite or the garden suite, that's correct.
And the second issue was in terms of concerns around absentee landlords. And Councilor McIver has already described the concerns, and I've definitely heard them as well. Sorry, can't hear me? Yeah, so,
Start throwing stuff at each other.
what? So the concerns about the absentee landlords, is there a way that bylaw can be written to address that? Is there any way that the municipality can have and exercise any control over absentee landlords? Or are there legal issues why that can't be done?
Yeah, from a land use zoning point of view, that's not something that you're going to be able to administer. It's the reason why we used to call the zone a single family zone. And did horrible things in the name of planning to make sure that it was my definition of a family that was in there. So we don't do that anymore. It's called a single unit dwelling. And that's why we don't even call them granny suites or in-law suites, because I'm not administering blood tests. So it is the other side of it, right? And the other side of it with Airbnbs as well, that people could build them in their backyard and rent them as Airbnbs. The province has promised to bring in some kind of legislative framework for dealing with Airbnbs, which should be helpful. But in both St. Peter's and in Antigonish, the conclusion of those councils was that the concerns about absentee landlords and Airbnbs were less of a concern than getting more housing stock into our community.
How do residents get their concerns addressed if there's a residence that is known to have more than, let's say, 2 tenants? Let's say they have 3, as examples that Councilor McIver mentioned. Whose responsibility, or how do residents in town get that sort of issue looked at?
Yeah, so they would, if there's a concern about any bylaw issue in the town, if you've got a concern about your neighbor building something and you don't think he's got permits, 902-65-5364, call me. District planning, that's one of district planning's responsibility. So it is based, I don't have a policing function, we don't go in and look for them. But if we receive complaint, I get a complaint form, send you a complaint form, and you fill that out and we investigate. Now, having said that, illegal apartments are incredibly difficult to administer. We had one that because of the house, I can only go in during daylight hours. I have to give notice. And so there's one, and that gentleman's no longer with us, but we make arrangements to go into the house, and he wasn't there. Okay, well, I got to start all over again. And people have concerns about me administering my bylaw. People are going to thwart me. So then we finally made an arrangement to go into the house and show that he was there. He had side-by-side semi-detached building with an extra basement apartment in it, so he's got 3. And we said, you can't have 3. It's got to be clear passage from the bottom to the top. So he said, I'll take care of it. Took the door off. And so now you've got clear passage. As we're leaving the building, I can hear the hammer nailing the door back on. So then what do I do? Go back. I don't know. I didn't go back, wait for another complaint. And my daughters. So yeah, it's a complaint, it's complaint driven, and we will respond to complaints.
Councilor McIver.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to John. We talk about single-family dwellings and
Single unit.
or single-unit dwellings, and like R1, in your home, or any home, R2, is there any restrictions where you would not have a washroom and a kitchenette and bedroom in your basement? And have a member of your family stay there? And it wouldn't be as number the only unit, or you'd be able to have 2 more units?
No, there's no restrictions of that. I mean, my house, I've got a kitchenette and a bathroom in the basement, and my son and daughter-in-law and grandson live there. But they've got free access to the whole house.
Correct, it would be a member of your family.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
So
not
that,
necessarily, right? I mean, I had an SPC student stay down there. And you can't do it on blood tests, right? You can't.
no, but
But you can have people living in your house.
right, and I just say single family, or
An SPC student wasn't.
not your family, no, but you allow them to come through your house, but that would be a rented apartment
A room,
or room.
yeah.
So if I were to put a kitchenette and bedroom in my basement and move my mother in, that wouldn't be considered a rented apartment.
If
It's my
if they have access to, and it's definition driven, right?
Right.
So in this document, it's about the free ability to go through the whole building.
Right. So I could split my basement and put a rental with a member of my family that has access to the whole house, but the other half doesn't. And I could put a garage suite up too.
So you're trying to
I'm
get.
trying to get,
Are you trying to get me to write the bylaw so you can't do that? Or,
I'm trying to find the loopholes because that's what everybody finds.
yeah, well, and again, it's extremely difficult to administer to go into somebody's house to check, right? So but if you had my house, if I had my house, I'd absolutely want to have a garden suite.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just one, just for clarification,
Mayor.
John?
Yeah.
So when a resident calls you with a complaint, and that resident signs the complaint form, who sees the signature or the name on the complaint form?
So that is information that is protected under FOIPA, Freedom of Information, Protection of Privacy. That is part of it that is protection of privacy. So if somebody fills out, so the question is, if I got a complaint form, the complaint forms have to be signed. Will I release the name of the person who signed the complaint form? And that is information that is protected under FOIPA. Freedom of Information is part of it, but protection of privacy is the other part of the FOIPA. So we would protect that privacy and not release the information. We would even go as far as I've had complaints that say, my neighbor is doing this and da-da-da-da-da, and then somebody FOIPOPs us, we would redact where she said, my neighbor does, right? Because that's enough to identify the complainant. Now, the only caveat to that is if I end up in court and the judge says to me, Mr. Bain, who complained? If I don't answer that question, I'm in contempt, and I'm not going to jail for you. But it's never, I've done this for 30-some years. We've only been compelled on one occasion to release that information. And in that case, the complaint, the issues were so egregious that half of Inverness signed it. So it was of no real value to know.
Just one more for clarification. So if whoever files a complaint, so for instance, if I file a complaint with you tonight, when that's being discussed, am I allowed to discuss that complaint?
as a counselor.
Yes.
No, if you submit, and this Gloria McCluskey found out the hard way, but if you have a complaint, if a counselor signs a complaint, and it comes to the council table, they have to recuse themselves. Because, well, they're in conflict, it's their complaint. They are, even if they're filing the complaint on behalf of you, for all intents and purposes, it's their complaint, and then they're discussing it, and then they're voting on it. So they're obviously in a conflict there.
Thank you.
Just ask for it.
Any other questions for John? Any other information required? Okay, so what would council like to do with this particular recommendation?
I would recommend that we go back and clean up this document a little bit, get some more information on it, and then possibly bring it back to council.
So bring it back to the planning advisory table and plan it?
To planning, yes.
Okay. So
That would be,
yeah, we don't require any action. It'll be in action on this
Yeah,
item.
no, I'll take that direction.
thank you very much.
And really was what I was expecting, because it's what we face in Inverness. And, but I'm hoping that this is something that can be approved, because if we're not clear that we've got a housing crisis as far as affordable housing in the community goes, good people leaving because they can't find a place to live.
Okay, so our third item that we're going to be reviewing here this evening is the proposed land use bylaw amendment to rezone lots in the Grants Pond subdivision, McLaughlin Drive, and the underdeveloped land off Spruce Street from the residential single unit R1 zone to the residential 2-unit R2 zone. Over to you, John.
Excuse me, Bishop, I'm declaring a conflict. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Over to you.
Do I have a laser that I'm shining at?
Not unless you're trying to do it on purpose, but you're not hurting me.
Yeah, so the last amendment, again, using that lens of inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible, the R1 zone is typically not any of those things. And so the direction that we had was to look at rezoning the Grants Pond subdivision from the R1 zone to the R2 zone. This is related to yeah, so it did come out of the Granny Suite, the accessory dwelling unit staff report. Again, these meetings are public. People can come to the planning advisory committee when we're discussing them. You can see the staff reports on our webpage. Council and district planning in particular are always happy to get input. So out of those discussions, there was a discussion, well, what about Grants Pond? Should they not have the ability to take advantage of these amendments as well? And if so, why not? So I don't see anything humorous about it, I really don't. The R1 zone is a antiquated land use control that everybody else is getting rid of. Everybody else is getting rid of. The R1 zone in Antigonish County is single unit and 2 units as of right, 3 units and 4 units through site plan approvals, 6 units by development agreement, and a 4-plex is not the end of the world. It really is. So I should just breathe. So the proposal is just to do that. And so there's 3 areas. There's Grants Pond, which is R1. There's the undeveloped areas off of Spruce Street, which are in the middle slide. And there's 4 lots by the Catholic Church, which used to be owned by the diocese, were put up for sale. And they were zoned R1 at the time. For the most part, all of those properties are already well developed. So you're not going to have that whole area raised and 2 units put up on it. But it will allow people to put basement apartments in. And if the other amendment goes, do a garden or granny suites. The intent of that is, again, related to being inclusive, being diverse, being equitable, just being fair, and being accessible. Have you had any questions about that? This was a pretty straightforward amendment. Just redo the zoning maps. And related to that, we received questions, well, what is that going to decrease my property values? No, it's going to increase your property value. If you can buy a house with a legal basement apartment in it, it's more valuable than a house without. That's just simple. So we also got questions, well, what about absentee landlords? What about people parking on the street, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? All of those are separate and independent from this type of amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I'll go last.
Councilor Doolin?
Yes, Your Worship, through you. John, I don't know, maybe you're right, I don't know, and you probably are right about the value of a basement apartment. But when you take a spot like Grants Pond or the new subdivision and that, the transportation there now, the traffic it's ungodly the way it used to be. My mother used to live there and we wouldn't see anything. Now, and since I blame Reeve Street also, because people are going down that way because of Reeve Street. I know they are. But we have difficulty with parking. I mean, what are you going to put down there other than basement apartments? Like Councilor McIver said before, are you going to start building on top of garages? Is that what we want to do? And then you get into the parking. It's just the traffic. And I, you know, I can debate the value too. I'm not sure if it increases the value on all homes. It may on a few, but the one that doesn't have the granny apartment beside it, or the basement apartment in it, is that increase in value because the one next door does? Probably not. Anyway, I will not be supporting this, and not at this time anyway. Thank you.
Through your worship to John. I guess this proposal bylaw amendment, and you have Grants Pond subdivision, McLaughlin Drive, and undeveloped lands off Spruce Street. You want to, or advisory planning wanted to change them to R1 or R2. And it's all in one amendment. I never heard any issues about McLaughlin Drive. I did have a number of emails and phone calls and concerns about McLaughlin or Grants Pond. And also the vacant lands off Spruce Street of what questions being asked, what was our plans and what was our layout for that part of the subdivision. because it's all in one proposal, and I think we may have jumped the gun a little bit, may need some more work on the vacant lands in Spruce Street, off Spruce Street, that I'd recommend this to go back to planning, to be revised with a little more information. And if it was put to a motion tonight, I wouldn't be supporting it either.
Through you, your worship, first of all, it's a comment to council and not to John. Back in November of 2020, we set our priorities. We set 5 priorities. And one of the top 2 priorities were to grow this town, to get more housing here, more affordable housing here. We have an opportunity here to just do just that. I hear the talk about the parking. We've already addressed that when you have a legal apartment or a granny suite, they're going to get their permits, you're going to get your parking. That's going to take people off the road. We publicly said now for about 16 or 17 months that we're trying to grow our town, we're trying to get housing here. We have a decreasing population, we want to grow the town. By not allowing this, we're doing exactly against what we've said for the last 17 months we're going to do. I haven't seen proof yet that having a basement apartment decreases value. I've called around. Antigonish doesn't have any R1. St. Peter's doesn't have any R1.
Well, hold it.
We're a town that needs to grow. And we've all said this together, all 5 of us. And the first time we go to try to do it, we're getting stopped. If we leave this and go to the public, let the public have their say and get proper education and get the proper information, instead of having a bunch of false information being emailed to us and accusations to us. If you have the proper information out there, you're going to get a lot truer pulse of what people actually want. Right now, we're hearing the negative from emails because people have got somebody or a group of people have got people riled up. It's strictly emotion. So I asked, why do we have the advisory committees if we're not going to support them?
Go ahead, Councilor.
Yes, I don't want to get into a debate here all night because we can. We have advisory committees for a reason. I can give you an example. We had advisory, the waterfront had advisory committee, and the advisory committee came back to rename the park Sunset Park, and you voted against it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely you did. So this is the prerogative of this council to make the decision how they do. I've been on this council now 20 years longer than you, and I've seen things. One of the biggest problems we have in this town, and housing is a problem, but if we have, you know yourself, being on council for a year, that we can't police the cars on the side of the street for snowplows.
You're right.
And so we don't have a bylaw enforcement officer. And we talked about that for years, and we have to get a bylaw enforcement officer. But if we open this up, you're going to have so many cars on the side of the streets, especially Grants Pond. There's no room down there. We know that. I walked through Grants Pond. I watched it be built. There's no room down there in Grants Pond. Maybe on McLaughlin Drive, maybe there is room. Well, we got to look at that also. But right now, I can't see anything down Grants Pond.
So, through your worship, if I lived in Grants Pond and I wanted to put a basement apartment in or an accessory building, I have to go to Eastern District Planning to get my permits. If I can't provide 1.5 parking spots, am I correct in saying I'm not going to get that permit? So I don't see how this causes a bigger parking issue. If anything, it helps our parking issues. If people have 3 vehicles, if a family has, both parents have a vehicle and the child has a vehicle, they don't have 3 parking spots right now.
Councilor, Deputy Mayor, you know yourself, we got no police often. It'll happen.
Thank you, worship. Through you, it goes back to what Mr. Bain said, he doesn't do blood tests. We don't have anybody to police parking. I don't know if we will in the near future, but we talked about it a lot. And Councillor, I did say that I was willing to put this back to planning so we can discuss it further and maybe put a little more thought into the Spruce Street lands that are undeveloped. And I mean, I don't know, that's how I feel about it. And that I said I wouldn't support it. If you want to kill the whole thing right here and now, I have no problem with that either. And it won't go back for review.
Okay, so it seems like we'll have to, I guess there's some, what I'm hearing from Councillor McDougall and Councillor McIver is that more information is needed. And there is obviously maybe some more work that we need to do in consultation that we need to do with residents of Grants Pond around a potential rezoning in that location. But there could be considerations given to some of the other areas. Is that what I'm understanding from you?
Yes, Your Worship.
And you as well.
I would look at the, like I said, I had no complaints about McLaughlin Drive. Nobody's called me or said anything. And I think we were premature maybe with the lands off Spruce Street, the undeveloped property. I'm willing to look at that, but I'm not interested in dealing with rezoning Grants Pond.
Okay, so at this point then we will move that back with the recommendations coming forward from council to planning, just to take another look at the recommendation based on the feedback that council's given. Okay, so we have two additions that we are going to be discussing this evening. Council would have gotten a letter that has been drafted and regarding the federal electoral boundaries changes that's being proposed. So I'd ask council if they've had an opportunity to review that draft letter. And
Just, maybe we should take Councilor McCory back in.
thank you, Deputy.
We'll give that to Jeffrey guy.
I'm not sure.
Be nice.
If it's in conflict, you can't discuss it next time in the advisory.
Okay, so the letter for the federal boundary review. I trust the council had an opportunity to review the draft letter, and I would ask if council have any suggestions for amendments or questions, or if you're prepared to accept the draft, we can sign it and send it off tomorrow.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, and just for the purposes of the gallery, there's suggested federal rezoning that would bring Antigonish Town and County into our constituency. So Mike Kellaway, our MP, would have to take on Antigonish Town and County as a result of the suggested federal zone changes. So the letter that we will be sending obviously will be to not support those suggested changes. Okay, anything lingering or left on that item? Okay, over to Councillor McDougall with regard to the Festival of the Straight Edition.
Yes, Your Worship, through you, and Deputy Mayor's on the committee also. We're looking for permission from council to hold our beer bash in the Civic Center on the 2nd of July. We're also looking for permission to have the pancake breakfast in the Civic Center that the Knights of Columbus put on, and any other events that we deem may be needed during the Festival of the Straight. If the Civic Center is available, that we can use it.
As a read venue?
Pardon me?
as a rain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we typically do.
So I'd move that motion, your worship.
I will second it.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to be able to offer some of our town buildings as rain venue for Festival of Strait and also for the beer bash event. Is that
That's
correct?
not a rain venue for the beer bash.
No.
Just,
Yeah.
just for a point of clarity,
Sure.
worship, the beer bash would be held in the arena,
Yes,
so that's what we're looking for
Okay.
for the beer bash.
and also a venue for the pancake breakfast
Correct.
and
There.
any other requirements as per rain venue.
Yes.
Question.
The question has been called. There's no one who has any questions or comments? Question has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded. Okay, the motion is approved. Now we will open up the gallery for questions. If you have any questions, I would ask that you come up, and typically our public question period has to do with questions that are related to any of our agenda items. So if you wanted to come up to the podium, just let us know your name and ask your question. If, you can ask the question to me. If it's a question that to another council member or staff, I can direct that question to the appropriate person. And I guess, so if there's anybody who has any questions, feel free to come up.
Yes, Your Worship. I'd like to know, is there a compelling business case that how much,
I know everybody probably knows who you are, but just for
oh,
the
I'm
matter.
talking more, 25 Crandall Drive.
Okay.
I'd like to know about this compelling business case, how it benefits the town with all the underdeveloped areas we do have to change Grants Pond from an R1 to an R2, which is a slippery slope as far as putting in 4-unit apartments, buying 2 or 3 or 4 houses and filling them up with people. We're already over congested, 100%. And there is absolutely no benefit to anybody in our area. That's why we bought. Our family's been there for 47 years. And the reason is we're there is because of the privacy of the single unit. To answer these questions that I gave you, was a risk assessment done? Do we fully understand or have retained any professional opinion on what such a move would do or could do to property values? Impact on street congestion, multiple tenants forced to park on streets, rental properties historically have not maintained properties as well as private homeowners. A significant portion of the people are their older retirement. And we're unnecessarily stressed about this. With this, for the person who converts their home, there's money. To have 16, 17 people on either side of you depreciates your property value. A couple of people who sell or convert right away will make a buck. The rest of the place is being run down. The town is being run down. Like I say, you wouldn't allow a $200,000 mini home where you put shipping containers. Where are we going? The properties, it's a bad situation that you created, and it's getting worse. And I saw it tonight from the example of the rewrite hasn't been properly presented. More time and thought has to be put into what you're doing. It's part of my retirement portfolio. I lost part of my pension. My house is part of my retirement. And if I have to sell that house and move to Halifax, I want it to be worth something. And in R2, as Mr. Bain said, there's a great percentage of the town is already R2. Why do you need more? There's close to 90% at R2. That's my
Okay, well, hold on now. There's a question in there somewhere.
Yeah, the question is, what's the business case for it? Who come up with a business case that we'll get tax revenue off of a bunch of little huts stuck in there, and then they're going to be trailers up beside the house and hooked up to water and sewer, totally depreciating the property value,
So
100%.
just 1 second. So I guess, well, in order to part of answering that question is going to have to, like, what is allowable in an R2 zone?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how to answer that, to be honest, Your Worship. I mean, the R1 zone and the R2 zone are so close. It's not a major amendment.
Yes.
The R2 zone, and the rest of the town works really well. I live in the R2 zone. Again, I don't know how to answer that.
So,
May I comment on that? There's a big difference and a big slippery slope of people in an R1 and an R2. An R1 is a single dwelling unit, as you know, and an R2 is multiple dwelling units, as you know. And that depreciates the value of my home. Yes, it does.
Please direct the conversation to the chair.
Okay, I'll direct it to the chair. Yes, Chair.
your point is taken. So I guess my advice would be that your questions be moved forward, since council has asked for this to go back to the Planning Advisory Committee. So those questions will accompany the review of what's been asked. And as well, there's definitely going to be clarity on, thank you, on the side of the Eastern District planning as well. So in terms of business case, what's the cost benefit analysis? Any risks, any costs?
Okay, I'll
Yeah, Deputy Mayor O'Coin had a comment first.
I was just going to comment that council has voted this down. There's really nothing to discuss. It's over.
I was going to second that we said we're bringing it back. We turned down Grants Pond. It's not going there. We are looking at the other two zones. So
now,
Grants Pond is under the picture, Chuck.
do I have any reassurance that it will remain an R1 in not 6 months, 6 years?
No, you don't. And you'll never have that, because tomorrow there might be, or next year, there might be 5 different people sitting around the table. They make the decisions for the town of Hawkesbury, this council. You might be sitting around the table.
I know.
I know.
Anybody else have any questions with regard to any of our agenda items? Hi, Maris.
I'm Eric Manis, and I think I know most of you here. There's some obvious questions that come to light when we talk about the planning document that was done in the planning report recommendation. Now, you did mention that Grants Pond is off the table, but our concern is on the whole aspect of what's happening here. And there's a lot of questions that I have and that I'd like to have answers for. And I know you're going to deliberate this in a planning advisory committee, but I would caution folks as well that the planning advisory committee should be an independent body and not mostly members of council making a recommendation to council. So that's an obvious question and concern. With regards
I learned my lesson the first time. Let's deal with one question at a time. But I lost all of Chuck's questions in his comments.
So
just our chair will just let you know who's on the planning advisory
So
committee,
what
just
is
for your
the number,
benefit.
7, Terry?
There's, the planning commission or the planning advisory committee has changed dramatically over the last 5 years. So it's primarily public members, members of the public with 2 councilors. And the chair can either be a member of the public or a councilor. In this case, it's a councilor. In the last council, it was a member of the public. So there has been significant change there, and certainly public are more than welcome to come to those and encourage, because we don't really get that kind of feedback that we need. So that is the place to voice your concern. So, but for this, we'll make sure that agenda is well advertised and that people know that what's coming on there, and you're able to get your voice heard a lot more easily through that process. And we'll certainly do that with this and try to advertise better, because I think certainly from tonight's people coming forward and expressing their opinion, which is great. We need that at planning advisory too. So we'll try to do a better job of getting the word out on that.
Okay, go ahead, Maris. Second question.
So getting back to the staff report, I mean, in the summary of evaluation criteria, there's some major concerns. First of all, has there been a financial impact report and study done on the increased density that the R1 zones, rezoned to R2, have? What kind of financial impact does that have on the municipality? Has there been a financial report done on that? And is that available to the public? Well, we do say in the report, he meets the criteria, so obviously, we're not sure even what that criteria is. So that's number one question. And I don't think we have the answer here tonight. The adequacy of the water and sewer in these locations to accommodate the increased density. Has there been an engineer's report and evaluation of the impact on the existing infrastructure?
Well, that's a very good point. I'm not sure if any consideration was given to that, John.
So again, this is an incremental amendment. It's, the R1 and the R2 zone are very similar. The uptake of changing the R1 zone to the R2 zone would be minimal. And so as far as your financials, your public works, your roads, all of those were seen to be adequate, given that this is a very minimal amendment.
Well, the R2 zone and the definition of uses are very crystal clear. And everybody can read that on the website. And it's not only a little about apartments, it's about duplexes, smaller homes.
So it's about
multi-unit, up to 3, I think it is.
Two. As of right, you can do it too.
The other question that I have that I think we'd like to have answered is the adequacy of the road network. I mean, we're increasing density in these areas. Has the traffic study been done? Is it available? What impact does it have on the residents that are currently in these areas? We also talk about in the report that the development or proposed development is not to obstruct any natural drainage channels or water courses. Well, I think everybody that's acquainted with these areas know that there are natural water courses. Have they been identified and are they protected? Okay. We also talk about the geological conditions in these areas. I think some of you councillors may be aware that the area in the Grants Pond that you're proposing to be R2 has very, very poor soil conditions. But it meets the criteria.
So those buildings they're already built on in Grants Pond.
Sorry?
They're already built on Grants Pond.
Yes.
So I'm missing your point.
The point is that the municipality many years ago gave up development in that particular area. And some of the older councillors may remember what happened when a construction that was attempted there. And that whole area was abandoned for any type of development.
Which is apart from this stuff here.
We also talk about buffering between the zones. I mean, we have an R1 zone. People purchased and built homes specifically because of the criteria in an R1 zone. And now we're changing it.
So they can put a basement apartment.
It's not just the basement.
Okay. We also, something else that we have to add is the buffering and screening when there is a transition from one zone to another. Typically, that should be accounted for, and is it accounted for?
I think your worship. I think through you, your worship.
Yeah.
If I may,
So-
Mayor.
Just 1 second, Maris, just so we can, we're falling behind all your questions,
Yeah.
so.
The Grants Pond rezoning, I think, is behind us.
Yeah.
And I believe you're talking about the unused lands above your place,
Yes, sir.
Spruce Street, I think, up there. Well, there's no roads in there yet. And we haven't gotten that far, but I know there is rough mapping, and you've probably seen it, of what roads would go in there and where they'd come out on the other side where Tamarack, where the sharp turn is. That's a four-way intersection originally for traffic. I think what the advisory committee through Eastern District Planning were to look at rezoning that as R2. It's above your place. And as I said earlier, it may have been a little premature as we didn't plan like how we were going to lay it out. And it has been mentioned, I've mentioned buffer, like if we have, I would like to see it planned if we're going to allow tiny homes, we'd have a cul-de-sac just for tiny homes, that's it. If we were going to allow mobile homes, we'd have them in a cul-de-sac by themselves with buffers from like your area, and then a buffer between them and maybe other housing, like single family homes.
Well, my question obviously is the council and the planning advisory committee is, you know, what provisions, I mean, we've heard tonight that R1 zones are typically antiquated, but there is a clientele for people that prefer to live in that type of zone where there's only single family units provided. By removing almost all the R1 zones and zoning into R2, what provisions is council going to make to balance off the land use within the town of Hawkesbury? That's basically the questions I have. You know, but this is a major concern. Obviously, you see from the turnout that's here when we start rezoning. So certainly, I'd like to really have a clarity of process. When will the first readings occur? When will the public hearings be done? What opportunities residents will have for objections and concerns? These all need to be very crystal clear. And my question to council is for you to ponder, how will this be achieved in such a significant change in the municipality? Thank you.
So just to clarify, if anybody else has any kind of questions or comments, I think it's been established that this council won't be considering a rezoning of Grants Pond specifically, but if there are any other questions or comments with regard to any of the other areas that could potentially be considered, I would invite you up or come on up.
My name is Paul, I'm a resident of my town. I haven't lived in one of these suggested areas for zoning amendments.
Sorry.
There you go. I'm a novice.
Just having a little bit of a trouble here.
So please forgive me if I'm a novice. I'm not so lived in this as this steam panel. But my concern, I guess, is the process. 20 years ago, I'm sure Councilor McGill was still here then. Thanks. I bought property in this area from the town, and there was a covenant established at that time, which I thought was a binding agreement on what was allowed and not allowed in this area. It was a large factor in my choice at that time to build in that spot. What I wonder is whether there's a legal validity to council unilaterally abrogating that agreement through this bylaw process. And does that maintain validity? I can tell you that if this was, I may be antiquated, I'm afraid, I may be a dinosaur. I do like my R1 zoning, I like my privacy. But if that had been a factor at the beginning, I can pretty much sure that I would not have chosen to live where I live.
Thank you. that point.
So I would like to know whether there is a legal framework for council to unilaterally change agreements. What trust do I have in the future that something cannot be done? If I'm a party to this, I'd like to uphold my word is to be my bond. I'd like to think it would be the same on the other side.
No.
Do I have any assurance that's legal, valid? You want my part?
No, I think it's a great question. We don't have our, we don't have our solicitor with us at
Well,
this point, but.
the areas that were under the deed covenants are not part of the rezon. And that's why, because they were took that deed covenant. So it's not, when you look at the maps, those properties are not part of it. It's the undeveloped properties off of Spruce Street, Grants Pond, and McLaughlin Drive. The ones that were under deed covenants, for exactly the reasons you just expressed, were not part of this.
Do you have any follow-up questions?
Paul, do you have a follow-up question?
Well, maybe I should see if I can look at that. Those copies, see what those were.
Yeah, the deed covenants are still in effect, they're registered against title. So.
Any other questions?
Arnie, could I ask another question?
I guess so.
In our,
I mean,
the existing R1, can you be an absent landowner? You have to live in your house,
sure.
or can you rent by a couple of houses and rent it
We-
out under the rules today?
Thank you, Chuck. We did have a kind of a brief conversation about that already, but maybe we can, it's
Yeah,
possible that not everybody is able to hear without the microphone, but
They're similar to Dr. Pluta. That was in the agreement of no fences, no secondary buildings.
right,
Clotheslines at the time until the environment became a serious issue.
right.
But you weren't allowed to buy houses in the area and rent them out under R1. Just want clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
So I'm not aware of a deed covenant that would have that stipulation in it. The municipality doesn't enforce deed covenants. District planning doesn't enforce deed covenants. It's typically with the exception of the town subdivision, because those deed covenants are with the town. But in your area, if there were deed covenants that stop somebody from buying the house and not living in it, I expect that that's not valid. I can't imagine. And the only way that you would enforce a deed covenant like that would be if the collective took the person to court. It's probably long past that. So for example, the deed covenants below the courthouse in Port Hood, the deed covenants below the courthouse only required you to have a one-story cottage. If you go there now, you'll notice that there's many that are above that. And it's because the deed covenant was not enforced by the owners when the first one was built. And district planning didn't enforce that because it wasn't in the zoning. The zoning allowed those to be built. And now if you go to Port Hood, you'll see there's many that are contrary to the deed covenants. And once you break it, the whole thing's unenforceable, at least the whole thing with respect to that issue. So clotheslines, if you didn't enforce it at the time, it's not enforceable now. So that's a long answer, but I guess the short answer is I could own half a dozen houses in Grants Pond and rent them all out if I had the money.
I don't think, we'll see. Thank you.
I don't think anybody here is going to sell you their house. So going once, going twice, there's no, Jason, did you have anything?
Yeah, sure. Jason McLean, longtime resident of Grants Pond, still resident of Port Hawkesbury. Has the town considered any other means of all these vacant lots where Spruce Court, Cheverry, there's still going to be lots in Cheverry, they were under that covenants of 1,350 square feet, whatever, built within 1 year, because my family looked at that and we just couldn't meet those covenants, so we purchased elsewhere in the town. One of the biggest holdbacks then was the price of the land. And what was given to me then was, we have to earn back what we put in for infrastructure on the sale of the land. And I argued, why don't you just make your money back on the yearly taxes? Fill this with houses that are 1350 and bigger, R1, and have a nice neighborhood up there. Or you need some single family houses up there. That's it, thanks.
Mayor, I can certainly make comment. So last year, I think many of you may have noticed, we did sell a number of lots last year. The price of those lots were at what was considered market value, but if we looked at any neighboring municipality, it was well under market value. So we had sold lots in Grants Pond at $20,000, $22,000. We sold lots in Tamarack for much, much less. It's all public information. So we pushed that boundary as far as we can and still didn't get that uptake for new builds. So we are trying to do that. There is an issue of if we're looking at a cul-de-sac, say Cheverry, and so some of the properties on Cheverry have covenants and some of them don't, then I think that's an issue. So some of the people that have bought that, have invested that money, have built their house to a certain standard, they would expect that the others that would build on that house would still build to that standard. What we're saying is that that's okay, so we'll keep Cheverry at that. But if we expand Aspen Close, or if we expand Pine Ridge, then maybe beyond that, maybe with a buffer or with some kind of change there, then those homes may be smaller homes, might be detached to garage instead of an attached garage, might, a smaller lot size, that type of thing. Or it might be an attractive duplex, or it might be something that fits. And if we look at examples around, that's what's happening in other neighborhoods, and that's how you can afford to build a subdivision. Is you have a mix of use. You have single dwelling units, and you have some more multiple unit dwellings. So that is the idea. We understand there's been a ton of discussion around this table about trying to sell property and trying to get developers into this area. We have been pounding the street and trying to do that as much as possible. We do have development permit application in place right now for for a multi-unit building. And we've had, there's 2 other developers that are interested as well. So we're really hoping that hasn't happened yet. But as we all know, we haven't had a new building for Hawkesbury in quite some time. And we need to do something to change that. And we know the demand is there. We just don't know how to get there.
Thank you for your question, Jason.
My name is Brian Bowman. I'm with Grants Pond. Has the town given any consider to the traffic implications of what's going to happen by opening up the zoning? Right now, since Reeve Street's been changed, the traffic through Grants Pond has increased immensely. And I'll tell you, it scares the heck out of me some days just driving home. My commute to work, which is very short, used to be 3 minutes, it's now 7 minutes. We have a lot of foot traffic running through, no sidewalks. A lot of kids going to school, no sidewalks. Crosswalks aren't great places for them. People coming to work in the morning for some reason have to drive fast. At the end of the day, they want to get home, they drive fast. It is a very dangerous spot for that. Increasing the number of people there, increasing the number of kids in that, is going to create a lot of issues.
Thank you. Maris, I think you had mentioned that as well, the traffic. Okay. I guess if there's no other questions, I would ask for a motion of adjournment.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? It is adjourned. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Okay.